good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our caring and courageous conversation that we are having tonight. If you are new to Mosaic Georgia's Facebook page, I am going to give you just a little bit of background about who we are and what our mission is. So Mosaic Georgia is a sexual assault center and child advocacy center. We serve Gwinnett County in Metro Atlanta and beyond. My name is Maryam Jordan, and I manage our professional education and training services here at Mosaic Georgia. Our mission is to take action and guide change for the safety, health, and justice for children and adults impacted by sexualized violence. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We are going to have questions and comments. I'll be looking into those at the end of the live stream, and we'll take that from there. But we are going to first start off with our conversation with our guest. This is also something that we're doing a little new this time. We would like for you in the comments to put the city that you're in and also your email address so that you can stay informed about future caring and courageous conversations that we have coming up. We will delete those email addresses within 24 hours. So thank you for that, your cooperation on that. So I'm really excited for tonight's guest. We have a very special guest. Kevin McNeil is with us, the CEO and founder of the 12 Project. I am just going to read his bio briefly so that you can get to know about the wonderful person that he is, and then we are going to start our conversation. So Kevin McNeil is a transformational speaker, victim advocate, author, and CEO of the 12 Project, an organization that educates the world on the effects of trauma and abuse on individuals, families, and communities. Kevin's passion is to help others heal from the effects of trauma and abuse. He's a renowned speaker who shares lessons from his own life experiences that transform, motivate, and inspire individuals' mindset and potential. Kevin is retired from the DeKalb County Police Department in Georgia after 20 years of service. He served 8 years as a police officer and 12 years as a special victims unit detective. Kevin's mission is to motivate change in the world through trauma and abuse education, and his vision is to create a better tomorrow for today's children. So thank you so much again, Kevin, for joining us tonight. We are so happy and excited to have you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for months. Thank you.
Thank you, Maryam. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you to your guests for joining us for such an important conversation. I look forward to sharing. And yeah, it's exciting to be part of a community that educates the world on the effects of abuse and trauma and bring healing into the world. So I'm excited.
Yes, excellent. I know that I understand that you recently spoke at the CACs of Georgia One Team Conference, and I heard really good things about that. I know that you'll probably maybe share some of what you shared there and even more. So we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah, that was a great experience. Anytime I get to share what I believe that I've been put on earth to do, it becomes life-changing for me. So each time I get to do it, and so One Team Georgia was amazing. I met a lot of new people and had great fun. It was amazing.
Right. Well, that is great news. Okay. Well, I just have a few questions tonight. So hopefully we'll just go ahead and dive right in, have our conversation, and a little bit later we'll look into the comments and questions and see what people might have for you tonight.
Sounds great.
Okay. So Kevin, I just wanted to start off, if you would just tell us a little bit about your story and why you wanted to have this conversation with us tonight.
Yeah, as a police officer, I was seeing so much violence in the street, domestic violence, human trafficking, murder. And I really didn't understand it. And I had a question for myself, why is there so much violence? Because, sometimes we watch the news, we only get glimpses and bits of stories. But when you're on the front lines, you see it. And so you kind of question that. And then, I became a detective and I started seeing the origins of violence come from traumatized children. And it was amazing to me. One day I walked into a CAC center. I had my own history, my own background, as most first responders do. But nobody knew my story. I was holding a deep secret of mine. But when I walked into a child advocate center, my first case was a little boy who had been molested by his uncle. And I sat there, and as that child advocate center, that team environment, enforcement had trained me to interact with victims. And I just saw this little boy come back to life right in front of my face. And so, but deep down inside, I was crying and hurting. The little boy inside of me came back alive as well during that interview. And that's when I knew I needed help. And it was because of that interview that I went to get therapy. Because many people didn't know that at the age of 12 years old, while walking home from school from a friend's house, I was kidnapped and I was raped by a man that I didn't know. And once he was done raping me, he got on top of me and began to squeeze my neck and tried to strangle me. I was able to fight my way off out of that situation, run all the way home. We lived in a bad neighborhood in Memphis. So when I got home, I lied to my mom, said I was robbed, but I showed up with no, shoes, no shirt. My jeans were barely on. They were, dirty. You could tell I'd been in a scuffle. And so I begged and pleaded with my mom not to call the police. I didn't want the police involved because I thought if they knew the truth about what happened, then my secret would be out, and not when I wanted to be out, but I would have little control over that secret. And so I was already bullied as a young kid. And so, growing up, becoming a law enforcement officer, I thought I had put all that behind me. And my first forensic interview wasn't just observing that child, but it was also the child in me having an opportunity to know what it's like to share his story in a very comfortable and a very supporting environment. And so that's what led to my life-changing moment, was becoming a detective and going to my first child after forensic interview.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm so glad to hear though that you obviously got the help that you needed. And it's just amazing how the brain works and how for so many years, you might have repressed that memory or something. And then when you had that interaction with that young boy, it kind of brought it all back and had you take a look at your own self and your own experience and then get help from there. So that's very powerful.
Yeah, and it was amazing. Not only did I numb myself from the event, I played football and ran track in the very same football stadium that my abuse occurred. Like that little boy, and I look back on it, the wisdom that he had to make himself a part of a team, whether it be a football team. When I left football, I joined the military. When I left the military, I joined the police force.
Mm-hmm.
That little boy knew that he could no longer be isolated from people, which naturally I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I think that buffered me a lot from the effects that trauma really could have had on me if I had not did that.
Yeah, yeah. And at the time that you were playing sports in that stadium, I mean, did you have a memory of what happened to you, or you just kind of blocked it out? So, I'm sorry, you said
I
you
just
became
blocked it
another
out.
person.
I walked past. Yeah, I became another person. I left that little boy on the bleachers.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
pulled up another person. I was more, but I acted out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
This new person was very, aggressive, very angry.
Mm-hmm.
However, because people around me wasn't, informed about how trauma worked, I was judged a lot as a bad kid.
Mm-hmm.
And so performance became my method of existing in the world. So
Right.
football made sense to me, places,
Yeah.
the military, police officer. So
Mm-hmm.
performance, and I tried to perform my way into acceptance, which a
Right.
lot of trauma victims try to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And then I think, thank you for sharing that. I think it's just so important for people to, to hear sort of how that happens and how the brain is really protecting you from, from that for so many years until you're really able to handle it. And something might trigger it to bring it back at a time in your life that you can handle it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And I think what really helped me too was I told my story on my own terms.
Mhm.
Like, I think a lot of people don't understand that. Oftentimes when the story is told by a victim, they lose control of the story because now law enforcement gets it and other people get it and they run with it. And if the
Right.
victim's not ready, right, to really experience what it's like to be a victim of trauma, it may be overwhelming for them. So it took those years of me, like, if for lack of a better term, being numb or disassociated from myself,
Right.
to actually have that buffer between when it happened and when I disclosed. However, that made it decentralized, which means that if the trauma was decentralized from the event, which meant that all of this behavior that came in between, there was no connecting it to the event. So now, even as an adult, I started having coping mechanisms that were destructive, and I didn't know where they came from until I became trauma informed and trauma educated. And once I felt that, a lot of things that I was dealing with as an adult went away, like suicide. Things that I was dealing with as an adult made more sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's so important because things like addiction to drugs and alcohol, suicidal ideations, as you mentioned, all of those things come up and you have no idea like why until you can sort of get that help and therapy that you need to unpack, where all of that's coming from.
Yeah, because this association was a survival mechanism. It's the body, and I always tell people your brain's smarter than you. The brain knew that as a little boy, I couldn't handle all of that stress, so it blocked it out for me.
Yeah.
And so, but it didn't prevent the symptoms from occurring as an adult and growing up as an adult. So it's very important for people to know that trauma victims respond differently to trauma. And some of the things they respond to or triggers may not be what society said is constructive or positive. And oftentimes people tell trauma victims to stop behavior without understanding why the behavior exists in the first place. To you, it may be a bad, disruptive behavior, but for them, it could be a coping mechanism. It could be something that they've used all their life to survive, and they know no other way to interact with the world and with people in their world.
So true. And that statement that you made, that the brain knows better than you do, is I've never heard it put quite that way before, but that is just, I mean, that's so profound and so true that, just how we're designed to our body and brain literally protects us, when we're experiencing trauma. So
definitely. And I often tell people trauma is not a bad thing. It's a natural response to a bad thing happening to you, right? And so I think sometimes trauma gets a bad name because we say it's bad, but it's just a natural response, the body's way of responding to an unnatural event, and it wants to protect the species or whatever environment that species is in. So it becomes very key and very important for us to understand, trauma is more something to learn from than it is to get rid of. And so that's why I help a lot of victims understand that, trauma is not something you try to, medicate or, get rid of. It's something that actually holds the wisdom of why you are the way you are today and how you think and process the world around you. And so that's what being trauma informed means, not just meaning, knowing what trauma is, but knowing how it affects not only the person, but their relationships going forward.
Right. That is so true. And I think that just really speaks to, all the shame that can come with trauma. But I mean, as you just said, it's don't be ashamed because it's something that happens. And then you have that experience to, get tools to be able to move forward from there. So I know there's oftentimes a lot of shame associated with trauma. So we don't want people to be ashamed, but we want them to be empowered to move forward in their new life because they survive.
Yeah, definitely. And it's and this is very important for the victims to know that, like I did, I separated from my body. I saw my body and myself as two different entities. So my body became a tool that I use to get acceptance, whether that through sports, some people do it through sex, or some people medicate and make their bodies numb because they don't like being themselves. I tell people this is the only crime, like someone breaking your house, right? They leave with something, you can replace it. Right. You ain't got to deal with it. You fix the door, fix the window. Someone steal your car, your insurance company get you a new car. But what happens when someone damages your body and your spirit, something that you have to carry with you for the rest of your life?
Right.
And you feel like that body is no longer any good because it's been damaged. It's been violated. And so everywhere you go, there you are, right? So you have to always remember that when it comes to victims, is that they are actually their worst critic at times, because when people victim blame and questions, like people say, why didn't you tell? Why did you do
Right.
this? Why didn't you fight? Why did
Mhm.
victims have already struggled with those questions? And
Right.
when someone who doesn't understand trauma comes back at them with those same questions, that's where that shame comes from. The interaction with people. Now they really feel bad because I felt bad for being a victim, but now because you asked me these questions, I feel bad because I didn't do those things that you said I should have done.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So important. So important.
Definitely.
So I know that in your when I read your bio a little bit earlier, we talked a little bit about the 12 project and some of the things that you're doing now. So tell me how, some of the initiatives that you're taking on now, how has that aided in your healing journey?
Yes, education is a big part of my healing journey. Once I learned about trauma, and once I learned that, trauma was something that happens to all of us, everybody's trauma may not be as dramatic as mine, and some may be even more extreme than mine, but we all respond differently.
Right.
And I found that, and I always tell people this, you can't love what you judge. And a lot of times trauma victims naturally judge themselves for being bad. Why did I, for me, it was, why did I take that shortcut? Why wasn't I home in time? Why was I, out at that late at night? Why
Yeah.
did I even, be in that area at that time? So there was a lot of self-blaming myself. And so the 12 Project was created to educate the public on the effects of abuse, because I kept going to trainings. We were talking about trauma in the classrooms and courtrooms, but nobody was talking about it in their living rooms.
Mm.
And I felt like that's what we needed to have those conversations the most, because I love a statement that says when one child is abused, a whole generation is affected. And so when we're not having these conversations, we have traumatized people actually bringing their trauma upon their children, in which we talk about generational trauma, because they don't know any better, right? It's an unconscious thing. And so what trauma does, and as I've explained and gave you an
Yeah.
example, it separates you. It makes you not have a relationship with yourself, which prevents you from having an authentic, intimate relationship with other people. And what ends up happening as a trauma victim, you end up having transactional relationships, which means that you're hustling for affection,
Mm-hmm.
um, and your relationships are not authentic or intimate, because until you get what you won't give out what they need. So it's very important to understand. So the 12 Project was created for that purpose, to help people understand, and for first responders to understand the job that we do. Because a lot of times, as a special victim detective, I was a detective investigating all these abuse crimes, and nobody taught me about trauma, which
Oh,
I thought was a great disservice to me,
right.
because you were sending me into these situations where I was told I was the expert and I was going to help this family. And I didn't understand when I saw certain things, like the parent not cooperating with investigations, or they're
Right.
angry. It's the first time that this has ever happened. And
Right.
for me not to understand that that trauma is also playing out in their lives, I
Mm-hmm.
was doing them a great disservice, and they were doing me a great disservice, the police department, by not teaching and educating me. So I made education a key component of what I wanted to do for the rest of my life when it came to this issue.
That's amazing. And I mean, as you know, Mosaic Georgia, we work very closely with law enforcement, and
Yeah,
all of us in offering these services that we do to victims and survivors of sexual assault obviously need to be trauma informed. And so we are very grateful for organizations like the 12 Project that, continue to make sure that law enforcement is informed and is
yeah,
trained and is, taking that victim-centered approach and trauma informed care
yeah,
means so much, and it's so important. And it's, there's such a high turnover in the police department as departments around
yeah.
the US, and especially in the special victims units. So it's, it's like all just ongoing, always there's going to be that type of training that's needed. So we really, really appreciate you working
Oh,
with law
thank you.
enforcement, working with families, being an advocate. Your knowledge, your experience is just invaluable to the work that we do. And, we're looking forward to doing more together with the 12 Project and with you, because you're just such an asset in this field. We really do
Thank
appreciate
you
you.
so much for that.
Yeah, of
Thank
course.
you.
Absolutely.
That
Yeah.
means a lot. Definitely
Well,
means
thank
a
you.
lot.
Thank you. We really do appreciate you. I do have just a couple more questions. I'm just kind of looking at my little list here.
Okay.
So in terms of the future, I mean, I know the 12 project is not going anywhere. You're here. Any like big future projects that you have, things that you would sort of like to see to do to just help you thrive more in your own life, or things that you want to offer in the future?
Yeah, I'm setting up online courses for first responders themselves to help with that problem that I talked about, not being educated, not being informed, not just on how trauma affects individuals and victims, but how trauma affected the workers who responded to it, the vicarious trauma, and how to create this work-life balance and how to educate their families on what they do and how it affects them. So when they come home, they understand when their loved ones come home, they may need a little space. So that's what I'm creating right now, a platform where people can go and they can go online, they can look at these classes, these modules that I'm teaching. And I'm also, trying to get some legislation passed, laws, whatever, when I can get in front of Congress people to talk about mandatory training for people, caregivers. There are people who are opening daycare centers and don't know about trauma. They don't know, there are people who are, in churches and all places where children grow where they're not adequately informed about the necessity and importance of understanding trauma, because they may be looking at something that may be evidence in an investigation that they may not even know is important. And so a lot of times we miss that. And so the Torah Project is evolving into more of an educational platform. Now I speak all around the world and the country. I started off speaking, but again, I found myself always in conferences and people who are already having a conversation.
Right.
And so that's what the Torah Project is at now. And what I don't want to happen and what I see happening, I think we get into a danger area when we start just having conversations. And I think when things become popular, like mental health is a popular topic right now.
Yes.
My worry is that we'll keep talking about it, but we won't do anything about it. We're used to talking as a measurement of action, and that's not. Conversation is not action. And
That's
so
right.
we have to implement plans as to how we're going to do this. So we're going to have to change laws. So the Torah Project is trying to do and be and constantly gearing towards. We have to make education not only a priority, we have to make it a possibility. We have to make sure that we telling our kids that we love them and we want to protect them, but we're doing different things. And so my greatest fear is that mental health, like every other popularized thing, will become consumer type, where people will start selling and monetizing the need for people to be healthy in a mental sense. So as a 12 project, I want to prevent it by sounding the alarm, like this is not something just to talk about. This is not something just to package as a money-making deal. Therapy, we talk about go to therapy, but could the population that we actually service actually afford therapy? And do our first responders themselves need therapy? Do we need to create a field in college and social work that's specifically geared towards therapy, geared towards specializing in first responders and how they receive therapy? And so those are all the things the Torah Project is struggling with and wrestling with and trying to put on the table.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, definitely have a lot on your plate, but it's a noble mission that you have, and we really again appreciate you for all of that and just your sincerity, because the health field and the mental health field, we don't, it's not just big business, like what some people will have you think, and the way certain services are carried out. We really do want to get people help and not just make money off of these things. So yeah, it's very important. Yeah. So I'm not sure.
Because sickness is.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Now I was going to say sickness is a business.
Yes.
We love to medicate and we love to diagnose, but real answers come when we're working as a team collaboratively, and we can have different tasks, but we must have the same mission. And that is to create a better tomorrow for today's children. That's the 12 Project vision, because the world we're handing to them, is not, sustainable. We have to be we have to hold people accountable on all levels, from music industry to entertainment, how they come at our kids, what they promote to our kids and market to our kids. I mean, that's a big thing the 12 Project also, is fighting against.
Right.
And, we cannot continue to say that we care for our kids, but we allow people to market to them that's particular.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm not sure, Kevin, if you have tuned into some of our previous Facebook Lives, but you are actually our first male conversation that we had. So that really does mean a lot.
Thank you.
Most people are aware of, female victims, young girls, teenagers, young women, and women of all ages, being victims. Of course, that's very true. And that do make up the highest numbers. However, there are many male victims, male survivors. So just appreciate your bravery for that. One question I typically ask is, what would you recommend to a survivor on their healing journey? Like, what steps should they take? Someone who's just recently been assaulted, but I'm just going to go a little bit further to say, in particular, a young boy or a man. I mean, what is there anything that, like, something you could speak into them in a way to just encourage them to not stay hidden, which I think tends to be the tendency among males when these things happen?
Yeah, I think one of the things I would say is that, it's not your fault. And I know we hear that a lot, but every victim needs to hear that, because particularly in our toxic masculine culture, where something like this happens to you as a male, you're seen as not male, or your sexuality is in question. And so, you can't talk about it. For me, healing happens through conversations. And so when we keep things to ourselves, our body maintains that secret. Because for me, silence leads to sickness. And I think that's why you see a lot of men either acting out in violence, or they get sick more often and die earlier than women do, because women will have conversations about things that ail them. But in the male culture, that's not something that we have been trained or culturized to do. And so I think one of the things that was important for me was to join a support team. Even though I did it unconsciously as a young male, I found the football team, and I found the support team, people who I felt like would protect me. And so, but that secret is it's hard to disclose that, particularly when you're coming up in certain families and communities where you're judged by your masculinity, you're judged by your ability to be a man, and not let something like that happen to you. So I would encourage young boys, if they're out there, your first step in healing is to find a good support group, someone that you can trust and tell your secret to. Because I don't want you to be like me, where I kept that secret and it led to destructive behaviors. I'm lucky. I was lucky. My addictions were limited to sex and alcohol, but I know other male victims who did commit suicide when I was only thinking about it.
Wow.
One of the things that when I interviewed males, what they talked about was they felt like they had nobody to talk to. They felt like there was nobody who could understand. And so it becomes very important for male survivors to come out and say things like this more often. Our culture doesn't even support it. In the state of Georgia, said a man can't be raped. It just says he can be sodomized.
Right.
That's why I always use the term.
That's the law,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous in my opinion.
It is ridiculous. And so we minimize it. And so it becomes very, embarrassing, because when we hear sodomy, we hear certain acts, we think of certain acts. And so rape, you're more of a victim. Sodomized, in a male's perspective, you're lesser of a man. You're not a victim.
That is true. Yeah, very true.
You just didn't fight hard enough, or you just didn't do enough to prevent it from happening.
Right.
So we have to be careful when it comes to, because there's a lot more men out there, and young boys who have been assaulted sexually, but they're not coming forward because we haven't created the space, right? We haven't created the space for them to be honest and to be truthful. So all this violence that we're seeing, that's that anger coming from that silent anger towards themselves, toward the world, toward the community. And so they don't know what to do with that emotion. So they display it in ways that may be destructive. Well, some men go to workaholics like me. I became a workaholic. I found, but my relationships suffered. I didn't know how to be, and I still struggle with intimacy, right?
Yeah.
Because it requires you being vulnerable. But the one time I was vulnerable, I was taken advantage of by a male that looked like me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had problems with authority. I had problems with males, trusting. And so what I would say is search, find, support is out there. But, unlike when I was coming up, it was very limited. But today it's out there. You
Right.
go online and find somebody, tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I found is when you have a conversation with a concerned listener, then that pain can be actually released in a good, safe space. You don't have to carry that around with you all the time. You can understand better how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And you can define yourself. You don't have to be defined by what happened to you or
Right.
how other people perceive what happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
Once you educate yourself, that's what saved me, revealing and education.
Mm-hmm.
And once I educated myself on, oh, this is what happened. As long as I understood my behavior, I understood why I was doing the things. It didn't matter what other people were telling me to stop doing because they didn't understand. They were judging me. And what I understood that as long as I didn't judge myself, if I had some self-compassion, because it's hard to love what you judge. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you're judging yourself, it's going to be difficult to love yourself. And so I had to wrap my hands and arms around that little boy. I had to learn to love him because I left him. I left him to survive. And that worked for me for a while. But that little boy rebelled. Those decisions I was doing, those choices I was making, that was that little boy saying, hey, I'm still here.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't silence him anymore. And
Right.
that's what I tell male victims. You may think you're silencing that pain, but it's going to come out in ways that may disrupt your life or even destroy your life. So find a support system and, keep looking. It's out there. Go on the computer, find a male support group, find
Yeah.
someone that's offering services. And that would be my advice to them.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Of course, Mosaic Georgia, we do have a 24-hour crisis line, and we'll put that phone number in the comments here of this Facebook Live. But what we'll also do is later this evening or tomorrow, we will put down some resources specifically for male survivors as well. We offer counseling and therapy here. All of our counselors are female counselors, but again, we'll put in some resources for male survivors as well. So if you are listening tonight and you need that, please check back on our Facebook page tomorrow, and we'll definitely make sure those resources are in there for you, because it's tough. I mean, it's really tough, and I know it's hard for men and young boys to face this and to seek help and to just seek that support system like you had. So it's a long, hard road, but it doesn't have to be as hard if the sooner you can sort of address things and talk to someone about it. So I think that's really important.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
What would you, this is my final question, and then we will get ready to look into the questions and comments and see what our viewers and listeners might have for us. But just with in the case of like support people and family, friends, caregivers, what if any of those folks are listening tonight, what do you recommend? How can they best support their loved one who's experienced some type of sexualized trauma or child sexual abuse?
Yeah, that's first of all, I would tell them that, particularly I tell victims this also, that healing is not an ED, it's an ING, right? Once you become a survivor of abuse, you'll always be healing. So
Yes.
oftentimes what happens is family members thinking, oh, you should just get over it. It's a one-time event or a multiple time event, the person is gone, locked away, or that they're no longer in your life. You should be healed from that. But that's not true. That's not true. And I think family members need to understand, because oftentimes what I find out in my research and my studies is that oftentimes family members have their own secret traumas. And so because they block out their own traumas, it's difficult for them to hear other traumas. And so one of my greatest advice to family is learn how to listen. And listening is an art. It's had to be done with compassion and empathy. However, what stops people from listening, again, going back to their own traumas, that blocked out so much of their trauma, so much of their pain, that when other people have pain, they can't hear. And what listening looks like, people may be alcoholic, they may be doing destructive behaviors, they may not be able to get along with people. And so instead of judging, create a space where people can express themselves. I know a friend who was molested at a very young age repeatedly, and he would get drunk all the time. I mean, he would get intoxicated, but that's when his truth came out. And people, nobody wanted him around. They just wrote him off as a drunk.
Yeah.
But if they had learned to listen, they would have heard the pain coming out of him. And that's what I would tell family members, is that listening is an art form, but it's hard because we try to stop behaviors rather than become curious about it. I always tell people, start with curiosity. Curiosity leads to compassion.
Yes.
And only through compassion can you have a connection. And it's only when that connection happens can you really have communication. We try to do it backwards. Right? We try to communicate with the hopes that we're going to create a connection, and the hopes that we'll create compassion, and the hope that we'll become curious further to create more compassion. That's not how it works. Right? And so curiosity is what creates that compassion. Because once I can be curious about why you're acting that way, it opens up a door for my compassion to come in and say, okay, listen. And then once that victim feel like they're connected to you, then they'll communicate what they need to communicate with you. So I have to tell people, family members, look, you can't heal in isolation. It's impossible. I don't think God created us to. And I think to heal, we have to heal in community. And I don't think our communities, our families are equipped or educated enough to understand that. I think we just want people to get help. We say get therapy. I hear people throw that out all the time, get therapy, because not everybody can afford therapy. Right? So if we think therapy is so important, we need to start having conversations about how do we create, alliances with therapists who in the area where you live, where so many of them will get pro bono out so that they can provide free therapy to the community and those who need it. And then how you go into the community and educate them on the importance of therapy, and not use that word, but use the word, listen, talking and conversation is what gets you healed. Like when I go into church community, I use that scripture that says, confess your pain. I said, I know the Hebrew says sin, but it's real in the context. It means pain. Confess your pain one ye to another so that you may be healed through the conversation and the revelation of what is ailing you, so that those in the community can come alongside you and sit with you in that pain. Oftentimes we try to tell people to stop, and just know I'm still healing. There'll never be an ED to my healed. And I think that's what sets a lot of victims up for disappointment and letdown. They're told, well, I went to therapy, I got medication, I shouldn't be feeling like this. And what they end up doing is they start judging themselves for, wait a minute, I got all the help that people said I should have, but I'm not feeling any better than what I think I should feel. And if they don't understand that once you embark upon this healing journey, in the beginning, healing hurts. Right?
Yes, good point.
In the beginning, it hurts. And so when you own that journey, if you don't have a support system, it's going to be hard to continue the journey. And here's another thing. People always ask me, what helped you with your resiliency? And this is a hard one to swallow for most people. It's responsibility. Once I took responsibility for my life and stopped expecting other people to give me what I needed, and I took that responsibility and started doing it for myself, start searching for support, not waiting for it to come, right? Start teaching people how to listen to me rather than expecting them to listen to me, And so that responsibility is a big role in your healing process. I have to be responsible. And so because, that happened to me, but I have a life to live. I have a life to give, and I'm responsible how that life is lived and how it's given for the remainder of my life. I can't stop what happened, but I can control, how I create this space for myself, And so I think a lot of times what makes this so difficult, though, Maryam, is that a lot of the abuse comes from their own family members.
Yes.
So that becomes the challenge. How do you break those rules? Because you know the rule, what happens in this house stays in this house.
That's
you know?
right. That's right.
And that's what's ailing them. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But it doesn't stay in the house. It goes into the communities.
That's
It
right.
goes into the school with a gun and it kills kids.
That's right.
So it doesn't stay in the house. It goes into the
doesn't.
streets.
That's
It goes
right.
into your body in the hospital beds with the cancers and diabetes and mental illnesses. So it doesn't stay in the house. That's the biggest lie ever told.
It sure is. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we're dealing with the symptoms. And that's why I try to tell legislators and government officials, we respond to the symptoms. That's why first responders are so burned out, because for every case they close, they get 3 more because it's symptomatic. We're not dealing with the root of the problem, right?
Yeah.
We're dealing with the symptoms of, but we don't want to pull up and deal with the root, which is generational trauma, and dealing with trauma at its very core and what it does to health, what it does to relationships, and what it does to our communities. So that requires honesty. And until we become honest, we're going to always be on this treadmill of responding to events after they happen. Right? And so that's what I would say we need to really focus on. Don't get so caught up in having these conversations, but get caught up in how do we implement some of these things that we need in order to make our world better, because conversations are not enough.
Right. That's true. That's true. So this conversation we're having tonight is the beginning, but it's not the end. You have just dropped so many pearls of wisdom. I'm like, I can't contain myself. I'm just going to repeat some of those things. So you said that healing happens in community, not in isolation. That's important for people to know. Isolation is not going to help you heal at all. So it's important to be in community. You also said it's important that people take responsibility for their trauma. Of course, that's very difficult as you begin to unpack some things and go back into your past to see what happened. It's hard, but you have to take responsibility and move from that. You also said that everybody can't afford therapy, which is so true. I mean, it's cost prohibitive for a lot of us. So, we have to find those other outlets, just to support groups and just other free community programs that are out there. So thank you so much for all of that. We could talk all night long, but I'm getting notes that there's comments and questions in the chat. So I think we're going to get ready to turn to that a little bit before we wrap up for the night. But let's take a look at some of our questions in the chat. So we've got, I see some of my Mosaic Georgia colleagues in here. One question says, when you begin to disclose about your abuse, how did you tell friends and loved ones, especially Black men? It seems that a lot of men are concerned with what the homies will think, harder to open up when they aren't as many tools or examples of model how to.
Yeah, that's a great question. The way I told my friends, I knew they were close. I knew they were supportive of me. And so I just told them and they started crying, which caught me off guard because I didn't expect that. But it showed a level of men now wanting to be vulnerable, and that gave them permission to be vulnerable. So now we have some deep, intimate conversations about life, because they know what my background is. And I think it may not be that way every time for every guy. And it depends on what type of circle you're running with. You'll be amazed that when you disclose how many other men have probably had similar experiences as you. So I would say, just say it, just tell it. And for me too, to piggyback off that question, telling becomes part of the healing process. When you reveal, I sit on the board of an organization called Reveal to Heal, and that's one of the things that I really believe in, that when you reveal, you heal. But that can backfire if you reveal to a different person or someone who's not a concerned listener. Revelation and disclosure are two different things. We reveal to heal, but we may disclose to get it to stop. That's what most victims do when it comes to as a detective. They disclose to stop the incidents from happening, but no one taught them about revelation. No one taught them about the revealing part. Like, how do you feel?
Mm-hmm.
How do you see yourself in the
Mm-hmm.
world now?
Yeah.
Your forms of expression now. And I think for me, telling those guys was more of a revelation than a disclosure.
Okay.
I think they understood more about me. So I would say focus on the revelation while you're revealing. Are
Mm-hmm.
you revealing because you want people to know?
Right.
I think first figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why would you tell?
Right.
And if you're not ready, don't do it.
Right.
Don't feel pressure to.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but you'll know. Like these two guys I disclosed to, I was very close to them. I felt connected to them, so I
Mm.
could communicate with them. So I would
Right.
say that's a very good question, but be careful. Make sure you're revealing and not just disclosing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a powerful response. And that question was from our friend Asia. So
Okay.
she put that in the comments for you.
Okay.
But yeah,
Hey,
it is
Asia.
yep. Hey Asia. But we are just I just think about what you said, having those trusted people that you can talk to, because you do have to be careful about people that you disclose to. So it is important to be in community and to have people around you that you can trust. So that's also really important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very important.
Um,
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying that was very important. Yes.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And so I'm looking back into our comments here. So my colleague is in the room with me, Susan, who's our marketing and communication specialist. She has put the crisis line number in the comments here. Also, we have a comment from Anthea Holton, and she says, I have heard Kevin share his story and he's truly an inspiration. Thank you for sharing again this evening. I've recently been despondent and questioning whether I'm making a difference when so few of our cases are prosecuted. Are we making a difference? Hang on a second, I'm having to click for more. Yes, we need laws and legislation pertaining to the mandatory training. Conversation is nothing without action. This was so timely. Thank you again. And so I will just also let you know, Kevin, that Anthea Poulton is one of our wonderful saints in Georgia. I think she might be in Dalton,
Okay.
but yeah, so
Cool.
she has that unique
Okay.
perspective. But thanks so much for joining tonight, Anthea, and putting your comments in.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And we've got let's see, we've got another question from Mandy. She says, do you have any advice for how to talk to an adult, especially a male who has disclosed abuse to you from when they were young, but might not be ready to get help and is still in a space where they continue to push the pain away? I assume you have to wait for them to be ready, but wondering if there's a gentle way to recommend healing that you find is effective, but something that still honors where they are in their journey.
Yeah, I think conversations oftentimes and I try to be careful with this when it comes to talking about trauma, the person is the expert on their own trauma. So I don't want to be the one having a dialogue. I want to have a conversation. I want them to a monologue. I want to have a dialogue. So one of the ways to do that is to ask them, what do you think will help you?
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is, how do you feel? That pain, be expressive with that pain. That's what I would say. Get them to express their pain to you, not just that it happened, but how do they feel because it happened? They feel that is. Ask those type of questions. How do you feel it has changed your perception as a male in society and culture? Do you feel judged? What do you think about shame? What do you think about guilt? And that way, the person feels like they're in control of sharing with you what they want to share. And they may even say, you know what, this has been helpful. I think I may, seek professional help because you have been very helpful in your listening.
Right.
And I think I want somebody who helped me go further along the way. So I would say, because they open up to you, they trust you enough. They feel like, but going back to what I said earlier, be curious. Oftentimes when people disclose, and that's why I made that point. It's the difference between disclosure and revelation. This person is not disclosing to you, they're revealing to you. Right. But they're trying to build a sense of connection so they feel like they can reveal even more. Disclosures to stop it. When people start telling you things because they want you to know things about them, that's a revelation. And that's an invitation. Revelations are always an invitation to get closer and to help me because I don't know how to help me. And so being there, being curious, allowing that person space to express how they feel about it, not just that it happened, ask backup questions like, sorry that happened to you. How does that make you feel as a man? Like the questions you ask me, and be able to share that and do that sharing, they may feel like, you know what, I'm comfortable enough now to go out and share with a stranger and get help for what I need. So I think that's the doorway in, is to, since they have revealed to you, give them more space to reveal even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's key. Like you say, I mean, it's really just about that listening. I think, to offer that support and just be a listening ear. Maybe they'll share a little bit more and more. And then when they're ready to, fully disclose and get help, then they'll do that. But I think, just listen and if you ask open-ended questions, not judging questions, not leading questions, nothing like that. Obviously starting from a place where you believe what happened and just offering any support that you can, being a good listener. So
definitely.
Yeah, I think that's great. Let me just look into our questions and comments. I don't think I see anything else. Susan, am I missing any comments or questions?
No, Emily just said thank you. That's the last.
Okay, we do have one of our therapists on our staff here also said thank you for being so brave, vulnerable, and willing to share your story with us. And thank you for the amazing work that you do. So
thank you so much. Really
good accolades for you, of course. But I just again, I think we'll probably be getting ready to wrap up, but definitely Kevin just wanted to say thank you again so much for you being with us here tonight. And this was just by happenstance. It was not on purpose, but June happens to be National Men's Health Month. So you are right on time having this conversation with us in the month of June. And again, we will put some resources specifically for male survivors in the comments by tomorrow. So if you need those resources, or if you know someone who does, please feel free to refer them back to our Facebook page, back to this video. Again, this is recorded. It will live here on our Facebook page. Feel free to share it after the fact, come back and watch it again. But hopefully, I know for sure that this information here tonight is valuable. And I think if you listen to it, watch it again and share it with your loved ones, it will be a great value to someone. So thanks again. Kevin, did you have any final words or last thoughts that you would like to share with us this evening?
Yeah, I would just say, let's do more of this, and less responding to what's bad in our world. Let's start doing some good by having these conversations and helping people understand, trauma is a normal thing from an abnormal event, and that we don't have to get rid of it, but we can understand it and learn from it. And I think that's the key to healing, is revealing, to go back and really, really sit with these things and start doing actions and creating, places and spaces where we can actually create spaces for other people to heal. Going into these communities that therapy is a bad name, is a bad, we've been trained to be silent and trained to not talk and share our business with people. We have to go back in and educate communities how dangerous that is and make that connection between that silence and that balance, right? That silence and that sickness. What is contributing to all these ill effects that we're seeing in our culture and society. And we can effectively make those connections and help people understand that. And I think they'll take trauma more seriously, and then they'll begin to take their own responsibility and creating the life that they want and the environment that they want.
Yeah, that is so important. So important. Thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't give you the opportunity to let people know how they can find you online, your website, how they can contact you or follow you on social media. You want to share that out to folks?
Yeah, I'm on social media as Kevin McNeil. You can go to my website at www.the12project, 12 is spelled out, the12project.com. You'll see all my information there, and you'll see information on upcoming courses, free ebooks that I got coming out soon. So yeah, stay connected.
Yeah.
And I make sure that, I continue to, share what God has given me to share.
Well, thank you so much. And all of that you said, we will also put in the comments so people can get your website, how to find you on Instagram, LinkedIn, that type of thing, so that they can be in touch. Again, Kevin is a speaker, an author. He does trainings, workshops, he does radio. So we are so honored again to have you join us and spend this time with us tonight. We're looking forward to our continued relationship and hopefully inviting you back to a conversation again in the future. So we really, again, appreciate it. And we will see you again next time.
Thank you. Also, they can see me on TV1's Fatal Attraction, the series Fatal Attraction. If they keep up. Yeah.
Thank you. TV1's Fatal Attraction. All right, we'll make note of that as well. And you all will hear from Kevin again and from Mosaic Georgia as well. Thanks again for joining us tonight. We will continue to put more resources in the comment section tonight and tomorrow. So please come back and visit this page, and everyone have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.